Have you ever noticed how most of our pain comes from people? Not because they intentionally hurt us, but because we expect something from them. We expect understanding, loyalty, appreciation, and respect. But the moment those expectations are not fulfilled, disappointment quietly enters our mind and steals our peace. The truth is, happiness becomes fragile the moment we place it in someone else's hands. But imagine reaching a point in life where no one's behavior can disturb your inner calm, where rejection does not shake your confidence, and where disappointment no longer controls your emotions. In this video, you will discover 7 powerful lessons that will teach you how to detach from unhealthy expectations, protect your inner peace, and build a happiness that no one can take away from you. Chapter 1. Happiness that depends on people is always unstable. Many people unknowingly give others control over their happiness. Without realizing it, they allow the opinions, actions, and attitudes of other people to determine how they feel about themselves and about their day. If someone praises them, they feel confident and valued. If someone criticizes them or ignores them, their mood quickly drops and they begin to doubt themselves. In this way, their emotional state rises and falls depending on how others behave toward them. This creates a very fragile kind of happiness. It feels good when everything goes well, but it can easily break when someone reacts negatively. The problem is that people are unpredictable. Opinions change, moods change, and relationships change. Someone who appreciates you today might misunderstand you tomorrow. When your happiness is built on something so unstable, it becomes very difficult to maintain inner peace. True happiness begins when you understand that your emotional stability cannot depend on the approval of others. When you stop constantly seeking validation from people, you begin to develop a stronger relationship with yourself. You start trusting your own judgment instead of waiting for others to confirm your worth. You begin to enjoy your own company and make decisions based on your personal values rather than trying to satisfy everyone around you. As this mindset grows, something powerful begins to happen. Other people's praise no longer makes you overly proud, and their criticism no longer shakes your confidence. Their behavior loses its ability to control your emotions. Your happiness becomes quieter, deeper, and more stable because it is no longer built on something outside of you. This is the moment when emotional freedom truly begins. Chapter 2. Expectations are the hidden source of most pain. Many people believe their pain comes from what others do to them, but in reality, the deeper cause is often the expectations they carry silently in their minds. Without even realizing it, we create invisible rules about how people should treat us. We expect them to understand our feelings, support our efforts, and behave in a way that feels fair to us. When those expectations are not met, disappointment begins to grow. For example, you may help someone and expect them to show the same loyalty in return. You may care deeply for someone and expect them to appreciate your presence in their life. But people do not always respond according to our expectations. They have their own priorities, emotions, and ways of thinking. When reality does not match the image we created in our minds, the mind quickly turns that gap into frustration or emotional pain. This is why expectations can quietly become the hidden source of suffering. The more expectations we place on people, the more opportunities we create for disappointment. However, when you begin to reduce those expectations, something powerful changes in the way you experience life. Instead of constantly feeling hurt by how others behave, you begin to accept that everyone acts according to their own nature. You stop demanding that people behave exactly the way you want them to. This does not mean you allow disrespect or tolerate harmful behavior, but it does mean you stop building your emotional peace around how others choose to act. As you release unnecessary expectations, your mind becomes calmer and lighter. You begin to interact with people without constantly measuring their behavior against your personal expectations. This shift creates a deep sense of emotional freedom because your happiness is no longer dependent on whether others meet the standards you imagined for them. Chapter 3. The freedom of letting people be who they are. One of the biggest reasons people feel frustrated in relationships is because they try to control how others behave. We often expect people to think the same way we do, to react the way we would react, and to treat us exactly how we treat them. When they do not meet those expectations, disappointment and resentment slowly begin to grow inside the mind. The truth is that every person is shaped by their own life experiences, beliefs, fears, and priorities. Two people can look at the same situation and respond in completely different ways because their inner worlds are different. When we try to force others to behave according to our expectations, we are fighting against their nature, and that struggle almost always leads to emotional exhaustion. Detachment offers a healthier way of seeing people. Instead of constantly trying to change others, you begin to observe them clearly and accept who they are. If someone is kind, you appreciate their kindness without becoming overly dependent on it. If someone is unreliable, you recognize that limitation and adjust your expectations instead of constantly feeling disappointed. When someone chooses distance, you accept that reality instead of chasing their approval. This mindset creates a powerful sense of freedom. Your mind no longer wastes energy trying to fix or control other people. Instead, you focus on what you can control, which is your own actions, your own reactions, and your own growth. Acceptance does not mean weakness or surrender. It means understanding reality clearly and choosing peace instead of constant frustration. When you learn to let people be who they are, your emotional life becomes much calmer. You stop carrying unnecessary anger and begin moving through life with more clarity and balance. This simple shift allows you to protect your peace while still maintaining respect and compassion for others. Chapter 4. Emotional independence is real strength. Many people confuse emotional attachment with love. They believe that constantly needing someone's attention, approval, or presence is a sign of a deep connection. However, when happiness becomes dependent on another person, it often creates anxiety and insecurity instead of real peace. The mind begins to worry about losing that person, being ignored by them, or disappointing them. Over time, this fear quietly weakens emotional stability. When someone becomes emotionally dependent on others, their mood begins to change based on how those people behave. If the relationship feels good, they feel happy and secure. But when the relationship becomes distant or uncertain, they immediately feel worried, rejected, or lonely. This constant emotional fluctuation makes it difficult to maintain inner balance. Emotional independence creates a much healthier and stronger mindset. It means you are able to appreciate relationships without relying on them for your sense of happiness or identity. You care about people and value their presence, but your peace does not collapse if their behavior changes. Your confidence remains stable because it comes from within rather than from external validation. When you become emotionally independent, your relationships also become more natural and balanced. Instead of constantly seeking reassurance or attention, you interact with others from a place of calm confidence. You give respect, kindness, and care freely, but you no longer depend on receiving the same energy back in order to feel complete. This kind of independence is not about pushing people away or becoming emotionally distant. It is about building a strong inner foundation that allows you to stand on your own. When your happiness is not controlled by anyone else, you develop a quiet strength that protects your peace in every situation. Chapter 5. Stop taking everything personally. One of the biggest reasons people lose their happiness is because they take too many things personally. A small comment, a delayed message, a careless tone, or a moment of silence from someone can quickly turn into emotional pain inside the mind. Many people automatically assume that when someone behaves negatively, it must be about them. They begin to think that they did something wrong, that they are not respected, or that they are being rejected. Over time, this habit of personalizing everything slowly damages inner peace. The reality is very different from what the mind often imagines. Most of the time, the way people behave has very little to do with you. People carry their own stress, fears, insecurities, and personal struggles. Someone might speak harshly because they are dealing with frustration in their own life. Someone might ignore a message because their mind is overwhelmed with responsibilities. Someone might appear distant because they are going through something internally that you cannot see. However, when we take everything personally, we interpret their behavior as a direct attack on our value. This habit creates unnecessary emotional suffering. Instead of staying calm and observing situations clearly, the mind begins to react immediately. One small situation can grow into hours of overthinking. A simple misunderstanding can turn into feelings of anger, sadness, or insecurity. When this pattern continues for a long time, it drains mental energy and makes life feel heavier than it needs to be. Detachment teaches a powerful shift in perspective. It reminds you that not every situation is about you. When someone acts negatively, instead of reacting immediately, you pause and observe. You begin to ask yourself a different question. Is this really about me, or is this about what they are going through? Most of the time, the answer becomes clear. People's behavior usually reflects their own emotions, their own mood, and their own internal struggles. When you understand this deeply, something begins to change inside your mind. You stop carrying the emotional weight of other people's reactions. You stop allowing small moments to disturb your peace for long periods of time. Instead of reacting quickly, you remain calm and grounded. This does not mean you tolerate disrespect or ignore serious problems, but it does mean you stop giving power to every small action or opinion that appears around you. Another important part of this lesson is understanding that people will always have opinions. Some will appreciate you, and some will misunderstand you. Some will support you, and others may criticize you. Trying to control how everyone sees you is impossible. When you spend your energy trying to satisfy every person around you, you slowly lose connection with your own peace and authenticity. The moment you stop taking everything personally, your mind becomes much lighter. Situations that once created emotional reactions begin to feel smaller and less important. You learn to focus your attention on what truly matters in your life, instead of reacting to every passing opinion or temporary situation. This mindset creates emotional strength. You become calmer in conversations, more patient in misunderstandings, and more confident in your own path. Instead of being controlled by how others behave, you remain stable within yourself. Over time, this habit protects your happiness because your inner peace is no longer easily disturbed by the unpredictable behavior of people around you. Learning not to take everything personally is one of the most powerful forms of emotional detachment. It allows you to move through life with greater clarity, patience, and calmness. Instead of carrying unnecessary emotional burdens, you simply observe situations, learn from them when necessary, and continue moving forward with a peaceful mind. Chapter 6. The Power of Being Comfortable Alone. One of the greatest fears many people carry is the fear of being alone. From a very young age, people are taught to believe that happiness comes from always being surrounded by others. They grow up thinking that relationships, friendships, and constant social interaction are the only ways to feel fulfilled. Because of this belief, many people become uncomfortable the moment they are left alone with their own thoughts. Silence begins to feel strange, and solitude begins to feel like loneliness. However, There is a powerful difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the painful feeling of believing that you are missing something or someone in order to feel complete. Solitude, on the other hand, is the peaceful ability to enjoy your own presence without feeling empty. When someone learns how to experience solitude instead of loneliness, their entire relationship with life begins to change. Many people avoid being alone because it forces them to face their own thoughts and emotions. When there are no distractions, the mind becomes more aware of its inner world. Thoughts that were previously hidden by noise and activity begin to appear. At first, this can feel uncomfortable, but over time it becomes one of the most powerful opportunities for self-understanding. When you spend quiet time with yourself, you begin to understand how your mind works. You notice the patterns in your thinking, the emotions that repeat themselves, and the habits that influence your decisions. This awareness allows you to grow as a person. Instead of constantly reacting to life without reflection, you begin to develop deeper clarity about who you are and what truly matters to you. Solitude also strengthens emotional independence. When you are comfortable spending time alone, you no longer depend on constant social interaction to feel happy or complete. Your mind learns that peace can exist even in silence. You begin to appreciate simple moments such as walking alone, reflecting quietly, reading, or observing the world without distraction. These experiences create a deeper connection with yourself and with life itself. Another powerful benefit of being comfortable alone is that it improves the quality of your relationships. When someone is afraid of solitude, they often stay in relationships simply to avoid feeling lonely. This can lead to unhealthy attachments, where people tolerate disrespect, negativity, or emotional imbalance because they fear being alone. But when you are comfortable with solitude, your choices become clearer and stronger. You interact with others because you genuinely value the connection, not because you need them to fill an emotional void. This mindset creates healthier relationships built on mutual respect rather than emotional dependence. You give your time and energy to people who bring positivity into your life, and you naturally distance yourself from situations that disturb your peace. Your relationships become more balanced because they are based on choice instead of fear. Being comfortable alone also strengthens confidence. When you rely less on external approval and social validation, your decisions begin to come from your own values and understanding. You become less concerned with what others think and more focused on living in a way that feels authentic to you. This confidence creates a calm and grounded presence that others can sense. Many of the wisest thinkers throughout history valued solitude as an important part of personal growth. Quiet moments allow the mind to rest, reflect, and discover deeper insights. Without constant noise and distraction, the mind becomes clearer and more focused. Ideas become stronger, creativity grows, and emotional balance improves. Detachment becomes much easier when you learn to enjoy your own company. When you no longer fear being alone, you stop chasing people out of emotional need. You begin to understand that your happiness does not depend on constant interaction or attention from others. Instead, your peace becomes something that exists naturally within you. The power of solitude is not about isolating yourself from the world. It is about building a strong inner foundation that allows you to move through life with calmness and independence. When you are comfortable with yourself, you can engage with the world more freely because your happiness is no longer tied to external validation. In the end, learning to enjoy your own presence is one of the most liberating experiences a person can have. It teaches you that peace does not come from always being surrounded by people, but from developing a healthy relationship with your own mind. Once you discover that you can feel calm, complete, and happy even in solitude, a new level of emotional freedom begins to open in your life. Chapter 7. True happiness comes from within. For most of their lives, many people search for happiness in the outside world. They believe happiness will finally arrive when life becomes perfect. They think it will come when they earn more money, when they find the right relationship, when people respect them, or when their life situation improves. Because of this belief, they spend years chasing circumstances instead of understanding the real source of happiness. At first, this pursuit feels reasonable. After all, positive experiences in life can certainly bring moments of joy. Achievements can make you feel proud. Relationships can make you feel loved. Comfortable living conditions can make life easier. But there is a deeper truth that many people discover later in life. External circumstances can create temporary pleasure, but they cannot guarantee lasting happiness. The reason is simple. Everything in the external world is constantly changing. People's opinions change, relationships change, careers change. Situations that once seemed stable can shift unexpectedly. When happiness is tied completely to these changing circumstances, it becomes unstable. The mind begins to move up and down with every change that happens in the outside world. This is why some people appear to have everything they once dreamed of, yet still feel restless or dissatisfied. They achieved what they thought would make them happy, but the feeling did not last as long as they expected. After a short period of excitement, the mind begins searching for the next thing that promises happiness. True happiness begins when a person starts looking inward instead of outward. It develops when you begin to understand the relationship you have with your own thoughts and expectations. The mind often creates unnecessary suffering by constantly comparing, judging, and worrying about things that may never even happen. For example, many people spend a large portion of their time worrying about how others perceive them. They worry about whether they are respected enough, successful enough, or admired enough. This constant comparison quietly steals peace from the present moment. Instead of experiencing life directly, the mind becomes trapped in endless evaluation. When you begin to detach from this constant comparison, your mind becomes lighter. You start to realize that your value does not depend on the opinions or recognition of others. Your worth is not something that needs to be constantly proven to the world. It is something that already exists within you. Another major obstacle to happiness is the habit of constantly chasing the future. The mind often believes that happiness will arrive later, once certain conditions are fulfilled. It might say, "I will finally feel happy when I reach this goal," or "I will feel peaceful when this problem disappears." But when that moment arrives, the mind simply creates another condition that must be satisfied before happiness can appear. This creates an endless cycle where happiness is always postponed. The mind becomes so focused on reaching the next destination that it forgets how to appreciate the present moment. Learning to find happiness within means breaking this cycle. It means realizing that peace is not something that appears only when life becomes perfect. Instead, peace comes from the way you relate to whatever is happening right now. This does not mean ignoring problems or pretending that life is always easy. Challenges will always exist, and difficult moments are part of every human experience. However, when happiness comes from within, these challenges do not destroy your inner balance. You face them with clarity instead of panic. One powerful step toward inner happiness is learning to appreciate simplicity. The human mind often believes happiness must come from something extraordinary, but many of the most peaceful moments in life are surprisingly simple. A quiet walk, a calm morning, a meaningful conversation, or a moment of reflection can bring a deep sense of contentment. When you slow down enough to notice these moments, you begin to experience life differently. Instead of constantly searching for something better, you begin to recognize the value of what already exists around you. Gratitude also plays a powerful role in developing inner happiness. When the mind focuses only on what is missing, life begins to feel incomplete. But when you start noticing what is already present in your life, your perspective begins to change. Gratitude shifts attention from scarcity to abundance. from dissatisfaction to appreciation. Another important part of inner happiness is self-acceptance. Many people spend years criticizing themselves for their mistakes, weaknesses, or imperfections. They believe they must become a completely different person before they deserve peace or happiness. But true growth begins with acceptance. When you acknowledge your strengths and weaknesses honestly, without harsh judgment, you create space for genuine improvement. Instead of constantly fighting yourself, you begin working with yourself. Self-acceptance does not mean refusing to grow. It means understanding that growth happens more naturally when it is built on understanding rather than self-rejection. Inner happiness also grows when you stop trying to control everything around you. Life contains many uncertainties, and trying to control every outcome can quickly exhaust the mind. When you accept that some things are beyond your control, you begin to focus more on what you can influence: your actions, your mindset, and your response to situations. This shift creates a sense of calm strength. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by circumstances, you learn to move through life with greater flexibility and patience. Another powerful realization is that happiness is not something that needs to be constantly intense or dramatic. Many people imagine happiness as a constant state of excitement or pleasure, but real happiness often appears as a quiet sense of contentment and balance. It is the feeling of knowing that you are okay, even when life is imperfect. It is the calm confidence that comes from understanding yourself and trusting your own path. It is the peaceful awareness that your happiness does not depend entirely on the unpredictable actions of others. When you reach this level of understanding, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop chasing happiness desperately because you realize it was never something outside you. It was always connected to the way you relate to your thoughts, your expectations, and your perspective on life. The more you detach from constant comparison, unrealistic expectations, and emotional dependence, the more your natural peace begins to appear. Life still contains challenges, but they no longer dominate your emotional world. You become someone who can enjoy success without becoming arrogant and face difficulty without losing hope. Your happiness becomes more stable because it is built on a strong internal foundation rather than external conditions. This is the deepest form of freedom a person can experience. When happiness comes from within, life becomes less about chasing and more about experiencing. You stop running after approval, validation, and temporary satisfaction. Instead, you begin living with awareness, balance, and appreciation for the present moment. And once you discover this truth, something powerful becomes clear. The happiness you were searching for in the world was quietly waiting inside your own mind all along. Chapter 8. Mastering Detachment. Without losing your humanity, many people misunderstand the idea of detachment. When they first hear the word, they imagine becoming cold, distant, or emotionally numb. They think detachment means no longer caring about people, avoiding relationships, or isolating themselves from the world. Because of this misunderstanding, many people resist the idea of detachment, believing it will turn them into someone heartless or disconnected. In reality, true detachment is the opposite of emotional emptiness. Detachment is not about removing love, kindness, or compassion from your life. It is about removing unhealthy dependence, unrealistic expectations, and emotional chaos that come from constantly trying to control people and situations. When you practice detachment correctly, you do not stop caring about people. Instead, you begin caring in a healthier and more balanced way. You learn how to appreciate people without trying to possess them. You learn how to love others without losing your own inner stability. This creates a much deeper form of emotional maturity. Instead of reacting to every situation with strong emotional swings, you begin responding with calm awareness. You become someone who can experience relationships fully while still maintaining personal peace. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with detachment is because they confuse attachment with love. Attachment often says, "I need you in order to feel happy." It quietly creates fear inside the mind, fear of losing someone, fear of being rejected, and fear of being left alone. When attachment becomes strong, the mind begins to cling tightly to people, expecting them to constantly provide emotional security. This pressure can slowly damage relationships because it turns love into dependence. Detachment transforms this dynamic. Instead of saying, "I need you to be happy," detachment says, "I appreciate you, but my happiness does not depend entirely on you." This difference may seem small, but it changes everything. When happiness is not dependent on another person, love becomes lighter and more natural. There is less pressure, less fear, and less emotional control. People who master detachment still value relationships deeply. They still care about family, friendships, and meaningful connections. However, they no longer allow those relationships to control their emotional state completely. If someone behaves kindly, they appreciate it. If someone behaves poorly, they do not allow that behavior to destroy their peace. This creates a powerful emotional balance that many people struggle to achieve. Another important part of detachment is learning to release the need to control how others behave. Human beings often believe that if they care enough, explain enough, or try hard enough, they can change the people around them. But the truth is that every person is responsible for their own growth and decisions. Trying to force someone to think differently or behave differently often leads to frustration and disappointment. When you practice detachment, you begin to understand this reality more clearly. Instead of trying to reshape others, you allow them to be responsible for their own choices. This does not mean accepting harmful behavior without boundaries. It means recognizing that your peace cannot depend on controlling someone else's actions. This shift creates an incredible sense of freedom. Your mind stops fighting battles that were never truly yours to control. Instead of constantly worrying about how people should behave, you focus on how you choose to respond to life. Detachment also teaches an important lesson about emotional responsibility. Many people believe that others are responsible for how they feel. They think someone else must fix their sadness, remove their anger, or provide constant reassurance. But emotional strength grows when you take responsibility for your own inner state. When you realize that your peace depends primarily on your own mindset, something powerful begins to happen. You stop blaming others for every emotional disturbance. You begin observing your thoughts more carefully. You learn to question whether your reactions are truly necessary or whether they are simply habits formed over time. This awareness gradually strengthens emotional resilience. Situations that once created intense reactions begin to feel more manageable. Instead of immediately reacting with anger, disappointment, or anxiety, you pause and reflect. You choose your response instead of allowing emotions to control you. Another important benefit of detachment is clarity. When people are deeply attached to outcomes, their judgment often becomes clouded. They may ignore warning signs in relationships, tolerate situations that damage their well-being, or make decisions based on fear rather than wisdom. Attachment can distort perception because the mind becomes too invested in a specific result. Detachment allows you to see situations more clearly. When you are not emotionally overwhelmed by expectations, you can evaluate circumstances with greater objectivity. You can recognize when something is healthy for your life and when something is not. This clarity helps you make decisions that protect your long-term peace rather than simply satisfying short-term emotions. Detachment also strengthens self-respect. When someone relies completely on others for happiness, they often compromise their values to maintain approval or avoid rejection. They may silence their opinions, tolerate disrespect, or remain in unhealthy environments because they fear losing connection. However, When you develop detachment, your sense of self becomes stronger. You begin to understand that your peace and dignity are more valuable than temporary approval. This realization encourages healthier boundaries. You learn to distance yourself from situations that repeatedly disturb your emotional balance. At the same time, detachment does not make you indifferent to others. In fact, it often increases compassion. When you are not overwhelmed by your own emotional reactions, you become better able to understand the struggles of others. You can listen more calmly, offer support without becoming emotionally drained, and interact with people in a more balanced way. This balanced compassion is one of the most beautiful results of detachment. It allows you to care about others while still protecting your own peace. You become someone who can offer kindness without losing stability and offer understanding without absorbing unnecessary emotional stress. Another powerful transformation that comes from detachment is inner confidence. When your happiness is no longer controlled by the opinions or behavior of others, you begin trusting yourself more deeply. You start making choices based on your own values, instead of constantly seeking external validation. This confidence does not appear as arrogance or superiority. Instead, it appears as quiet strength. You become calmer in difficult situations, more patient with challenges, and less affected by temporary negativity. People often notice this stability, even if they cannot fully explain it. Over time, detachment also changes how you experience life itself. Instead of constantly chasing approval, validation, or perfect outcomes, you begin focusing more on growth and experience. Life becomes less about controlling every detail and more about learning, adapting, and evolving. You still pursue goals and relationships, but you do so with a lighter mindset. Success becomes something you appreciate rather than something you desperately need. Failure becomes a lesson rather than a personal defeat. This balanced approach allows you to move forward without carrying unnecessary emotional weight. Ultimately, mastering detachment does not remove emotion from life. Instead, it refines emotion. It removes the chaos created by unrealistic expectations and emotional dependence, leaving behind a calmer and more stable form of happiness. You still care, you still connect, and you still experience life fully. The difference is that your inner peace no longer collapses when things do not go exactly as planned. When you reach this level of understanding, happiness stops being something fragile and temporary. It becomes something deeper, something steady, something rooted inside your own awareness. And once that inner stability appears, you begin to move through the world with a quiet sense of freedom. You care about people, you appreciate relationships, and you pursue meaningful experiences. But at the same time, you know that your happiness is not something that can be easily taken away. It exists within you, steady and calm, regardless of the changing circumstances of the world around you. Chapter 9. Letting go of control and trusting the flow of life. One of the deepest reasons people struggle to stay happy is their constant attempt to control everything around them. The human mind naturally wants certainty. It wants to know what will happen tomorrow, how people will behave, and how every situation will unfold. When life moves in unexpected directions, the mind begins to resist, worry, and create stress. This struggle to control life quietly steals peace from many people without them even realizing it. From a young age, people are taught to plan carefully and shape their future through effort and determination. While planning and effort are valuable, many people slowly develop the belief that everything in life must follow their expectations. When reality does not match their plans, frustration begins to grow. The mind starts asking questions such as, "Why did this happen?" or "Why did things not go the way I wanted?" These questions often lead to disappointment, anger, or sadness. However, life has always contained uncertainty. No person can control every event, every opportunity, or every decision made by others. Even the most carefully designed plans can change because of circumstances outside our control. The weather changes, people change their minds, opportunities appear and disappear, and unexpected situations arise at any moment. When a person tries to control all these moving parts, they carry a burden that no human mind can comfortably hold. Learning to let go of excessive control is one of the most powerful steps toward lasting happiness. Letting go does not mean becoming careless or passive. It means understanding the difference between what you can influence and what you cannot. You can influence your effort, your decisions, your attitude, and the actions you take each day. But you cannot fully control how others respond, how opportunities appear, or how every situation unfolds. When you accept this reality, something begins to shift in your mindset. Instead of constantly fighting life, you begin working with it. You still pursue your goals, but you no longer become emotionally destroyed when situations change. Instead of reacting with frustration, you adapt and move forward with greater flexibility. Many wise philosophies throughout history have emphasized this idea. They teach that peace comes from focusing on what is within your control while accepting what is beyond it. When people ignore this principle, they often spend their energy worrying about things that cannot be changed. This creates unnecessary mental pressure and drains emotional strength. Trusting the flow of life allows the mind to relax. When you understand that not every outcome must be perfectly controlled, you begin experiencing life with greater openness. You allow events to unfold without immediately resisting them. Instead of assuming every unexpected situation is a problem, you start seeing it as part of a larger journey. This mindset also reduces the fear of uncertainty. Many people worry constantly about the future because they believe everything must go exactly according to plan for them to be happy. But when you develop inner stability, you realize that your happiness does not depend entirely on external outcomes. Even if circumstances change, your mindset remains balanced. Another important aspect of letting go of control is releasing the need to control how people see you. Many individuals spend a large portion of their energy trying to manage other people's opinions. They carefully choose their words, actions, and even their identity based on how they believe others will react. This constant self-monitoring creates pressure and anxiety. The truth is that people will always form opinions, and those opinions will often change. Trying to control how every person perceives you is impossible. When you let go of this need, you begin living more authentically. Your actions become guided by your values rather than by the fear of judgment. This authenticity creates a deeper sense of confidence and inner peace. Letting go of control also improves your ability to handle disappointment. When people cling tightly to specific outcomes, they often interpret any change as failure. But when you approach life with flexibility, setbacks become learning experiences rather than emotional disasters. You begin to see that unexpected paths can sometimes lead to growth or opportunities that were not originally visible. For example, many people look back on difficult moments in their lives and later realize that those experiences taught them valuable lessons. Situations that once seemed like obstacles eventually became turning points that shaped their strength or direction. When you trust the flow of life, you allow these transformations to occur without constantly resisting them. Patience is another powerful result of releasing excessive control. When you stop demanding immediate results from every effort, you begin understanding that growth often happens gradually. Some achievements require time, persistence, and continuous learning. Accepting this process prevents the frustration that often appears when results do not come instantly. This patient mindset creates a healthier relationship with progress. Instead of constantly measuring your success against unrealistic timelines, you focus on steady improvement. Each step forward becomes meaningful because you are no longer rushing anxiously toward a distant destination. Trusting the flow of life also strengthens resilience. When people believe they must control everything perfectly, unexpected problems can easily overwhelm them. But when you accept that challenges are part of the natural movement of life, you become mentally prepared to handle them. You adapt more easily because you are not shocked by change. Resilience grows when the mind learns to move with life rather than constantly pushing against it. Difficult moments still appear, but they no longer feel like the end of your stability. Instead, they become temporary chapters in a much larger story. Another powerful transformation happens when you release the need to control every detail. You begin to experience the present moment more fully. Instead of constantly worrying about future outcomes, your attention returns to what you can do right now. This presence improves both your effectiveness and your peace. You perform tasks with greater focus, you appreciate small moments more deeply, and you engage with people more sincerely. Life becomes less about constant mental struggle and more about meaningful participation in the present. Letting go of control also encourages trust in your own ability to adapt. When you know that you can handle challenges as they arise, you stop fearing uncertainty so intensely. Instead of trying to eliminate every risk, you develop confidence in your capacity to respond intelligently to whatever happens. This trust in yourself becomes one of the foundations of inner happiness. You realize that even when situations change, you still possess the strength to navigate them. Your peace no longer depends entirely on predicting the future perfectly. In many ways, life becomes lighter when you release the illusion of total control. You still take responsibility for your choices, but you no longer carry the exhausting belief that everything must happen exactly as planned. You begin to understand that happiness does not come from controlling life perfectly. It comes from developing a calm and flexible mindset that can move through life with awareness and resilience. When you combine detachment with trust in the flow of life, something remarkable begins to happen. The constant tension that once filled your mind starts to dissolve. Instead of struggling against every unexpected change, you learn to adapt, grow, and continue moving forward. This shift creates a deeper sense of freedom. Life becomes less about rigid control and more about meaningful experience. You pursue your goals with determination, but you also remain open to the lessons and opportunities that appear along the way. And once you reach this understanding, you begin to see life differently. You realize that happiness was never meant to come from controlling every outcome. It comes from developing the inner stability that allows you to remain peaceful even when life moves in unpredictable ways. Chapter 10. Living freely when your happiness no longer depends on anyone. There comes a powerful moment in a person's life when they finally realize something simple but deeply transformative. Their happiness was never meant to depend on anyone else. For many years, people search for emotional security in relationships, friendships, social approval, and validation. They hope that someone will come into their life and complete the missing pieces of their happiness. They believe that if the right people stay close to them, their life will finally feel peaceful and stable. At first, this belief may seem harmless. Humans naturally seek connection, and relationships are an important part of life. However, when happiness becomes completely dependent on others, it quietly creates vulnerability. The moment another person changes their behavior, loses interest, or walks away, the emotional stability built on that connection begins to collapse. Many people experience this pain repeatedly because they never learned to build happiness from within. Living freely begins when you break this pattern. Plus, it begins when you understand that relationships should add joy to your life, not become the only source of your joy. When happiness depends entirely on someone else's presence, the mind becomes trapped in constant emotional tension. You begin worrying about losing people, disappointing them, or not receiving the same level of care in return. This fear slowly drains peace from everyday life. But when you develop inner independence, something remarkable begins to change. Your emotional balance becomes stronger because it is no longer controlled by external approval. You begin to experience relationships in a healthier way. Instead of clinging tightly to people out of fear, you appreciate their presence without losing your own stability. This transformation often feels like a form of quiet liberation. When happiness is no longer dependent on someone else's attention or validation, you begin to experience life with greater freedom. You stop chasing approval, and you stop adjusting your identity just to satisfy others. Instead, you begin living in alignment with your own values, your own growth, and your own understanding of life. One of the most noticeable changes that happens during this transformation is the disappearance of constant emotional pressure. When people depend heavily on others for happiness, they often feel a subtle anxiety in relationships. They analyze conversations, overthink small changes in behavior, and worry about how they are perceived. Their mind constantly searches for signs of approval or rejection. However, when happiness comes from within, this anxiety gradually fades. You begin interacting with people more naturally because you are no longer trying to prove your worth. Conversations become lighter, relationships become more balanced, and your mind becomes calmer. This inner freedom also changes the way you handle disappointment. In the past, when someone let you down, the emotional impact may have felt overwhelming. You may have spent hours or even days thinking about why it happened, questioning your value, or replaying the situation in your mind. But when your happiness no longer depends on others, disappointment becomes easier to process. You still feel emotions, because detachment does not remove your humanity. You may feel sadness, frustration, or disappointment when something meaningful changes, but these emotions no longer control your entire sense of well-being. Instead of collapsing emotionally, you acknowledge the feeling, learn from the situation, and continue moving forward. Another powerful effect of this independence is that it strengthens self-respect. When people depend too heavily on others for emotional satisfaction, they sometimes tolerate situations that damage their dignity. They may accept disrespect, ignore their own boundaries, or remain in relationships that repeatedly harm their peace. They do this because they fear losing connection more than they value their own stability. But when happiness comes from within, your priorities become clearer. You begin to understand that protecting your peace is more important than maintaining every relationship. You become more willing to step away from situations that consistently disturb your emotional balance. This does not mean rejecting people or isolating yourself. Instead, it means choosing relationships that are healthy, respectful, and supportive. You begin surrounding yourself with individuals who contribute positively to your life rather than draining your emotional energy. Living freely also creates a deeper sense of personal authenticity. When you stop depending on external validation, you no longer feel the need to constantly perform for others. Many people spend years shaping their personality based on what they believe others expect from them. They hide certain thoughts, exaggerate certain qualities, or suppress parts of themselves in order to fit into social expectations. However, when you develop inner happiness, this pressure gradually disappears. You begin expressing yourself more honestly because your identity no longer depends on constant approval. This authenticity attracts people who appreciate you for who you truly are, rather than for the image you present. Another important transformation is the way you approach your goals and ambitions. When happiness depends on external approval, achievements can sometimes feel like a way to prove your worth. People may chase success primarily to gain recognition, admiration, or validation from others. But when happiness comes from within, your motivation changes. You pursue growth and success not because you need approval, but because you genuinely value improvement and contribution. This creates a healthier and more sustainable form of ambition. Your efforts become driven by purpose rather than by insecurity. Freedom also appears in the way you experience everyday life. When your mind is no longer constantly seeking validation or worrying about how others perceive you, you begin noticing simple moments more clearly. You appreciate conversations, experiences, and opportunities without constantly analyzing them. Life begins to feel lighter because your mental energy is no longer consumed by unnecessary emotional battles. Instead of reacting to every opinion or expectation around you, you move through the world with quiet confidence. This quiet confidence often influences how others perceive you as well. People tend to respect individuals who are emotionally stable and self-assured. When someone demonstrates that their happiness does not depend on constant approval, they naturally appear more grounded and trustworthy. However, the most important benefit of this freedom is internal rather than external. When your happiness no longer depends on anyone else, you experience a deep sense of peace that remains stable regardless of changing circumstances. You understand that relationships may come and go, opinions may change, and situations may shift unexpectedly. But your inner stability remains intact because it is built on self-awareness rather than external validation. This does not mean life becomes perfect or free of challenges. Difficult moments still appear, and emotional experiences continue to exist. But the difference is that these moments no longer define your entire sense of well-being. Instead, you move through life with a steady foundation that allows you to face both joy and difficulty with balance. Ultimately, living freely means recognizing that happiness is not something another person can permanently give or take away from you. People can contribute to your joy, but they cannot be responsible for maintaining your inner peace. Once you understand this deeply, something powerful happens. You stop chasing happiness desperately because you realize it was never something outside you. It was always something that grows from your mindset, your awareness, and your ability to live authentically without depending entirely on the changing behavior of others. And when that realization fully settles in your mind, life begins to feel different. You continue building meaningful relationships, pursuing growth, and experiencing the world fully. But at the same time, you carry a quiet certainty within you. Your happiness is yours. It is not controlled by approval, rejection, or circumstance. It lives inside your awareness, steady and resilient, no matter how the world around you changes. Chapter 11. The Quiet Strength of Inner Peace. In a world that constantly demands attention, reaction, and emotional involvement, inner peace has become one of the rarest and most powerful qualities a person can develop. Many people move through life in a constant state of mental noise. Their thoughts are filled with worries about the future, regrets about the past, and endless concerns about what other people think of them. Because of this mental noise, they rarely experience true calmness. Even when everything around them appears normal, their mind continues to race with unnecessary tension. The quiet strength of inner peace begins when a person learns how to calm this constant mental turbulence. It is not something that appears overnight. It develops slowly through awareness, self-understanding, and the practice of detachment. When someone learns to step back from their thoughts, instead of becoming controlled by them, they begin to experience a different way of living. Most emotional suffering is created by the mind's habit of reacting immediately to every situation. A small disagreement becomes a personal attack. A delay becomes a sign of rejection. A mistake becomes proof of failure. These interpretations happen quickly and often without conscious awareness. The mind jumps from one assumption to another, creating emotional storms that could have been avoided with a moment of reflection. Inner peace grows when you begin questioning these automatic reactions. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. You observe what is happening both around you and inside your mind. This simple pause creates space between the event and your response. In that space, clarity begins to appear. When people learn to pause before reacting, they begin to realize that many situations do not require emotional drama. Some problems resolve themselves with time. Some misunderstandings disappear once communication becomes clearer. Some worries fade away once you realize they were based on assumptions rather than facts. This awareness gradually reduces the number of unnecessary emotional battles in your life. Your mind becomes quieter because it no longer reacts intensely to every small disturbance. One of the most powerful benefits of inner peace is emotional stability. People who lack inner calm often feel controlled by their emotions. If something positive happens, they feel excited and energetic, but when something negative appears, their mood quickly collapses. Their emotional state moves up and down depending entirely on external circumstances. Inner peace creates a different experience. Instead of extreme emotional fluctuations, your mind remains balanced. Positive moments still bring joy, but they do not create unrealistic expectations. Difficult moments may bring sadness or frustration, but they do not destroy your overall stability. This balance allows you to navigate life more effectively. When challenges appear, your mind remains clear enough to think logically. Instead of reacting with panic or anger, you evaluate the situation calmly and decide what action is truly necessary. Another important aspect of inner peace is the ability to release unnecessary conflicts. Many people carry emotional burdens for long periods of time because they replay past situations repeatedly in their minds. They think about what someone said years ago, what mistake they made, or what they wish had happened differently. This habit keeps the mind trapped in the past. Even though the situation has already ended, the emotional impact continues because the mind refuses to let go. Inner peace develops when you understand that holding on to these memories does not change the past. Instead of constantly revisiting old wounds, you begin focusing your attention on the present moment. You acknowledge the experience, learn from it, and allow it to remain in the past where it belongs. Forgiveness plays an important role in this process. Forgiveness does not mean pretending that harmful actions never happened. It means releasing the emotional weight those actions carry in your mind. When you forgive, you free yourself from the constant burden of resentment. Another powerful source of inner peace is simplicity. Many people complicate their lives by constantly chasing more achievements, more recognition, and more possessions. While ambition and growth are valuable, they can also create stress if they become the sole measure of happiness. Inner peace encourages a simpler perspective. It reminds you that happiness often appears in quiet moments rather than dramatic achievements. A peaceful morning, a meaningful conversation, or a moment of reflection can provide more satisfaction than constant competition or comparison. When you begin appreciating these simple experiences, your relationship with life changes. You no longer feel pressured to prove your worth through constant productivity or external success. Instead, you focus on living with awareness and intention. Another important part of inner peace is learning to protect your mental environment. Just as physical health depends on the quality of the food you consume, mental health depends on the quality of the information and influences you allow into your mind. If you constantly expose yourself to negativity, conflict, or unhealthy comparisons, your mind will naturally become restless. However, when you choose to surround yourself with positive influences, meaningful ideas, and supportive relationships, your mind becomes calmer. This does not mean avoiding all challenges or difficult conversations. It means being mindful of what you allow to occupy your attention and emotional energy. Inner peace also strengthens patience. Many people feel frustrated when results do not appear immediately. They expect progress to happen quickly and become discouraged when growth takes time. However, lasting change often requires patience and consistent effort. When you develop inner calm, you become more comfortable with gradual progress. Instead of rushing anxiously toward distant goals, you appreciate each step of the journey. This patience reduces unnecessary stress and allows your efforts to unfold naturally. Another remarkable quality of inner peace is that it influences the people around you. When someone interacts with a calm and balanced individual, they often feel more relaxed themselves. Your presence becomes reassuring because it is not filled with tension or emotional chaos. This quiet influence can improve relationships, conversations, and even professional environments. People tend to trust and respect individuals who demonstrate emotional stability because they know those individuals will respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. Over time, inner peace becomes a foundation for every other aspect of life. It improves decision-making, strengthens resilience, and deepens your understanding of yourself and others. Most importantly, inner peace reminds you that happiness does not require perfect circumstances. Life will always contain both positive and challenging experiences. But when your mind remains calm and balanced, these experiences no longer control your overall sense of well-being. You begin to move through life with a steady confidence that does not depend on constant approval or perfect outcomes. And this is the quiet strength of inner peace. It is not loud, dramatic, or attention-seeking. It does not need recognition or validation from others. It simply exists within you, stable and steady, allowing you to live with clarity, patience, and freedom no matter what changes occur in the world around you. Chapter 12. Becoming the source of your own happiness. For most of their lives, many people search for happiness outside themselves. They believe happiness is something they must find somewhere in the world, in relationships, achievements, wealth, recognition, or approval from others. Because of this belief, they spend years chasing situations that they hope will finally bring them lasting peace. Sometimes they reach those goals and experience a short period of excitement, but eventually the feeling fades and the search begins again. This endless search happens because many people misunderstand the true nature of happiness. They think happiness is something that appears when life becomes perfect. They imagine that once they achieve enough success or receive enough appreciation, they will finally feel complete. But life rarely follows such a predictable path. Circumstances change, people change, and situations shift in ways that no one can fully control. When happiness is built entirely on these changing circumstances, it becomes unstable. A promotion might create excitement for a short time, but new pressures eventually appear. A relationship might bring joy, but it also introduces expectations and emotional complexity. External experiences can add meaning to life, but they cannot provide permanent emotional stability. True happiness begins to appear when a person stops searching for it only in the outside world and starts developing it within their own mindset. Becoming the source of your own happiness does not mean isolating yourself from others or rejecting relationships. Instead, it means understanding that your emotional well-being must first come from your relationship with yourself. The mind plays a powerful role in shaping how we experience life. Two people can face the same situation and react in completely different ways. One person may see difficulty as a reason to feel defeated, while another person sees the same challenge as an opportunity to grow stronger. The difference is not always the situation itself, but the mindset through which it is interpreted. When you become the source of your own happiness, you begin developing a mindset that supports inner stability. You stop relying completely on external validation to determine your value. Instead of constantly asking whether others approve of you, you begin asking whether your actions align with your own values and principles. This shift may feel subtle at first, but it creates a powerful transformation over time. When your happiness depends less on outside approval, you begin living more authentically. You make decisions based on what truly feels meaningful to you, rather than constantly adjusting your behavior to satisfy everyone around you. Another important part of becoming the source of your own happiness is learning how to enjoy your own company. Many people fear being alone because they associate solitude with loneliness. They believe they must constantly surround themselves with others in order to feel complete. However, when someone develops a healthy relationship with themselves, solitude becomes a space for reflection, creativity, and personal growth. Spending time alone allows the mind to slow down and reconnect with what truly matters. Without constant distractions, you begin to understand your thoughts more clearly. You recognize the patterns that influence your emotions, and you learn how to guide your mindset toward greater calmness and balance. Self-awareness becomes one of the strongest foundations of inner happiness. When you understand your own reactions, fears, and motivations, you gain the ability to manage them more effectively. Instead of feeling controlled by emotions, you begin responding with intention and clarity. Another powerful step toward internal happiness is practicing gratitude. The human mind often focuses on what is missing or what could be improved. While striving for improvement is valuable, constant dissatisfaction can prevent you from appreciating what already exists in your life. Gratitude shifts attention from what is lacking to what is present. It reminds you that even during challenging times, there are still moments of value, learning, and connection. When gratitude becomes part of your daily awareness, your perspective changes. You begin recognizing opportunities for joy that were previously overlooked. Developing inner happiness also requires accepting imperfection. Many people believe they must become flawless before they deserve peace. They criticize themselves for past mistakes, weaknesses, or shortcomings. This harsh self-judgment creates unnecessary emotional pressure. Self-acceptance does not mean ignoring areas where growth is possible. Instead, it means recognizing that personal growth happens most effectively when it is built on understanding rather than constant self-criticism. When you treat yourself with patience and compassion, you create the mental environment needed for genuine improvement. Another important aspect of becoming your own source of happiness is learning to manage expectations. The mind often creates detailed images of how life should unfold. It imagines how relationships should behave, how success should appear, and how quickly goals should be achieved. When reality does not match these expectations, frustration appears. However, when you reduce rigid expectations, you become more open to life's natural flow. You still pursue your goals with effort and determination, but you no longer become emotionally overwhelmed when situations change. This flexibility allows happiness to remain present even during uncertain times. Instead of constantly chasing perfect outcomes, you begin appreciating the process of growth and experience. Inner happiness also grows through meaningful action. When your activities align with your values, your life begins to feel more purposeful. Purpose creates a sense of direction that is deeper than temporary pleasure. It encourages you to contribute something meaningful to the world around you. Purpose does not have to be grand or dramatic. It can appear in simple forms, such as helping others, learning new skills, or improving yourself gradually each day. These small actions build a sense of fulfillment that is more stable than short bursts of excitement. Another transformation occurs when you stop comparing your life to others. In a world filled with constant images of success and achievement, it is easy to believe that everyone else is living a more fulfilling life. However, comparison often distorts reality because people usually share only their most positive moments while hiding their struggles. When you release the habit of comparison, you return your attention to your own journey. You begin measuring progress based on your own growth rather than on the appearance of others. This creates a healthier relationship with success and failure. Over time, becoming the source of your own happiness creates a deep sense of emotional independence. You still value relationships, experiences, and achievements, but your peace no longer depends entirely on them. They become additions to your happiness rather than the foundation of it. This independence also allows you to interact with the world in a more generous and balanced way. When you are not constantly searching for validation, you have more emotional energy to give kindness, understanding, and support to others. You become someone who contributes positivity to the world rather than constantly seeking it from outside sources. Ultimately, becoming the source of your own happiness is one of the most empowering realizations a person can experience. It transforms the way you approach life, relationships, and personal growth. You stop chasing happiness as if it were a distant destination and begin recognizing that it can be cultivated within your own awareness. Through self-understanding, gratitude, acceptance, and purposeful living, you create a stable foundation that supports lasting peace. And when this realization becomes part of your daily mindset, something extraordinary happens. Life no longer feels like a constant search for fulfillment. Instead, it becomes an opportunity to experience each moment with clarity, appreciation, and quiet confidence. Because you finally understand that happiness was never something you had to find somewhere else. It was always something you had the power to create within yourself. At the heart of this journey lies a CD22.C. Simple but life-changing truth. The less you expect from others, the more peaceful your life becomes. Much of the emotional pain people experience does not come from life itself, but from the expectations they silently carry inside their minds. They expect people to always understand them, always appreciate them, and always behave in a way that feels fair or loving. But the world rarely moves according to the expectations we create. When those expectations are not fulfilled, disappointment appears. Over time, this disappointment can slowly turn into frustration, resentment, or sadness. Many people spend years feeling emotionally drained without realizing that the true source of their suffering is not other people, but the invisible expectations they placed on them. Detachment begins the moment you understand this pattern. It does not require you to stop caring about people or disconnect from relationships. Instead, it encourages you to care in a healthier and more balanced way. You learn to appreciate people without depending on them for your happiness. You allow others to be who they are while protecting your own inner peace. As you practice this mindset, your emotional world begins to change. Situations that once created stress no longer feel as heavy. Small misunderstandings no longer disturb your entire day. Opinions and judgments from others lose their ability to control your confidence. Your mind becomes calmer because it is no longer constantly measuring whether people meet your expectations. Instead of reacting to every action around you, you begin observing life with greater clarity and patience. One of the most powerful transformations happens when you stop seeking constant validation. Many people spend their lives trying to prove their worth to others. They want recognition, approval, and reassurance that they are valued. While appreciation can feel good, building your entire sense of happiness on external validation creates emotional instability. When you begin trusting your own values and understanding your own worth, something powerful happens. Your confidence becomes quieter, but stronger. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to everyone or defend your choices constantly. You simply continue growing and moving forward. This quiet confidence changes the way you experience relationships as well. When you do not depend on others to feel complete, your connections become more genuine and less pressured. You interact with people because you enjoy their presence, not because you fear losing them. This creates healthier and more balanced relationships where appreciation flows naturally rather than through emotional dependence. Another important realization is that happiness does not come from controlling life perfectly. Life will always contain uncertainty, change, and unexpected challenges. Trying to control every outcome often leads to frustration because many circumstances are beyond our influence. True peace appears when you focus on what you can control: your mindset, your actions, and your response to situations. When you release the need to control everything else, your mind becomes lighter. Instead of constantly resisting life's changes, you begin adapting to them with greater calmness and resilience. As this mindset develops, happiness begins to appear in a different form. It is no longer loud, dramatic, or dependent on perfect circumstances. Instead, it becomes a quiet and steady sense of contentment. You begin appreciating simple moments, meaningful conversations, and personal growth. You stop measuring your happiness against the expectations of others and begin living according to your own understanding of life. This form of happiness is much stronger because it comes from within. It cannot be easily taken away by rejection, criticism, or unexpected changes. Even when life becomes difficult, your inner stability remains intact. Ultimately, learning to detach and expect less from others is not about losing connection with the world. It is about discovering a deeper connection with yourself. When you understand your own mind, trust your own path, and build happiness from within, life becomes less about constant struggle and more about meaningful experience. You continue caring, loving, and building relationships, but you no longer allow those things to control your emotional balance, and that is the quiet power of detachment. When you expect nothing from anyone, you gain something far more valuable: freedom. Freedom from unnecessary disappointment. Freedom from constant emotional pressure. Freedom to live calmly, confidently, and happily, no matter how the world around you changes.